You have a metal arm? That is awesome, dude. By Just Another Book Nerd. Chapter 1. Peter. Peter lost his arm at about 11:30 p.m. on a Friday. He was stopping a gang that were armed with knives and guns. Peter had tracked the whereabouts of the gang's main hideout, where he fought them. As the final high-ranking members of the gang escaped the building, they set off bombs that were planted around the warehouse to get rid of evidence. The bombs exploded and Peter scrambled to escape the blast and the rubble that was falling rapidly on top of him. He had almost made it to the doorway when a particularly large chunk of concrete fell on top of his left arm, crushing it. He tried and failed to lift or even move the concrete. He was unable to move his left arm, and his right arm had sustained 2 bullet wounds and 3 stab wounds during the fight, as he sometimes tended to lead with his right arm. It was already weak enough without having to try to lift large amounts of concrete. He had already called the team to help with the fight, so he knew that they were on their way, but he had no idea how long they would be. So, he curled up against the concrete to use it as a shield against the building that continued to fall. 15 minutes later, Peter heard the familiar sound of the Quinjet and his dad's repulsors. Then he heard Tony call out a concerned, "Kid, are you in here? Where are you?" He received a weak, "Dad, I'm down here. My arm is stuck under a piece of concrete and I can't get it off," in return. That was all the worried group of adults needed to rush towards the weak voice. They found Peter with his mask off, battered and bruised, bleeding out, with his old left arm trapped beneath a large hunk of concrete. They watched as his face lit up and he smiled at them all as they approached. "Hey guys, glad you could come. You missed the party, but you're welcome to join the after party," he said with a smile, before passing out from blood loss and exhaustion. Natasha quickly jumped forward and gently caught his head before it hit the ground and held him as Bucky and Steve worked on lifting the concrete. It took 20 minutes and the Hulk to lift the concrete. Tony, Steve and Vision took a look at the damage done to Peter, while Nat and the rest of the Avengers got Bruce back. They got him back within 10 minutes, telling Hulk how much Peter needed Bruce's help to fix him up. Hulk has a soft spot for Peter. By then, Peter had been moved into the med bay on the Quinjet, and they were making their way back to the compound. Peter would live, but his left arm was damaged beyond even his super healing's repair. It had to be amputated, and Peter was put in a medically induced coma for a week while he healed from losing his arm and his many other bullet and stab wounds he had suffered from that night. Tony, with the help of Jury, created a vibranium arm for Peter during that time. They probably would have done lots of things with it, such as adding speakers and trying to make it sticky like Peter's real hand, but they decided that it would be more fun for him to join in, and he also would prefer not to be left out of major sciencing, as he would put it, especially if the arm was being made for him. It would be a new thing for him to have fun upgrading, to come up with new ideas for. Peter always sees the good in everyone and everything. Peter woke up the following Saturday to the familiar white ceiling and pale blue walls of the med bay in the compound. Friday had the lights dimmed and the walls soundproofed. She knew him so well. He looked to his right and saw his dad sitting there. "Hey, Dad." Tony looked up from staring at the mattress. "Hey, Pete." "What day is it?" "Saturday. A week after you last were awake." "Okay, coma or medically induced coma to help me heal?" "Medically induced, thank God." "Cool. So you know the drill. Tell me how many injuries I sustained, starting with the worst, and then you tell me how, while you know that you can't stop me from being Spider-Man, I should be more careful and call for help as soon as I need it, not halfway through the fight when I have already gotten injured quite a bit." Peter smiled, deepening his voice when he imitated his dad. Tony smiled at his son's antics before taking a deep breath and saying, "Well, I'm going to cheat this time and start with the not as bad but still very bad injuries. You had 7 stab wounds, 8 bullet wounds, bruised ribs and some internal bleeding. And finally, your left arm. If you can remember, it was trapped and crushed beneath that concrete. It was damaged beyond repair and we had to amputate it." Tony looked up at Peter to gauge his reaction. He was in shock, staring at Tony with his mouth open in a perfect O shape. Tony leaned across his son and lifted the blankets on his left side to his torso. Peter looked to his left, and where his arm was supposed to be, he saw nothing. "Huh," Peter said, ever so eloquently, acknowledging the fact he now only had one arm. He then seemed to realise something. He grinned and turned to his dad, who was looking at him expectantly. "So, me and Bucky are going to be twinsies now?" And Tony burst out laughing. I hope you have a good day and you enjoyed the chapter. I will be posting the rest of the chapters in due course.